So as you all have been aware coming to this conference during the week, Understanding Society is a really valuable study for doing family research. You can look at relationships within families, you can look at before and after key family events such as pregnancy or children leaving home or couples separating. We follow families as they leave home and set up their own children, as they set up their own households, which means it's a really valuable resource for multi-generational studies as well. In our last bid, which we won last year, we added a range of enhancements to, we hope, improve the way that Understanding Society can be used for family research. And I'm going to tell you about them now. In the time I've got, it's really going to be kind of headlines of what we're planning to do. But at the end, I'm going to tell you when we're going to be consulting people about them, and you can stay in touch with us through email and newsletters, or just get in touch with me. So in our bid, we identified kind of 6 areas that we think Understanding Society can be improved to improve the research opportunities for families. So the first 5 are listed on this slide are about the way we collect data, and then the last section's about the way we share data and make them usable. So the first thing is that although Understanding Society is a really high response rate representative study, unsurprisingly at the times of big life events like couples separating or having a baby, there's a higher than usual loss to follow up. So one of the things we're doing, I'll tell you about in a minute, is kind of thinking of ways that we can improve follow up at that point in time. Similarly, at that point in time, you know, a year later, when you get your annual interview, you may not remember key things about how you felt about that event happening to you or what your plans and expectations are. So we have a new initiative called Event Triggered Data Collection, which is about checking in with people more regularly to find out about these key family events and follow up on them. Thirdly, obviously, families are very dynamic and couples separate or get together. And so we have a big project about thinking about how we collect data from what we originally called separated families, and we're now calling parents living apart, and we'd be interested in your views on that, but I'll tell you a little bit about that later. Fourthly, Understanding Society covers all ages, and it kind of covers lots and lots of different topics, and that means that we kind of do a kind of breadth rather than depth study. But we feel there's some key parts of the life stage where we should really look at things in more depth, and the key one we're thinking about now is pregnancy and early life, so I'm going to say a little bit about that. And then fifthly, in terms of data collection, you know, Understanding Society is a UK survey, but obviously now we do lots of data collection online. We're able to follow people if they migrate. And so we've begun to do some research on doing that, which I will tell you about. And then, you know, that's all our plans for the future. But even before we get there, Understanding Society is quite complicated to use for some of this family research. If you want to track people through their life stage, you have to kind of follow them in different waves and different data files. So we're going to be setting up a data file, again, kind of welcome your views on what to call it, but we're calling it at the moment a babies data file. Similarly, you know, partnerships and fertility and other things, we track that in the annual questionnaire, but it's a lot of work for researchers to bring that together. And so we're thinking of sharing event history files where we do that for you. And then the last thing, which Nicole's going to talk about in a minute, is how to link families across households. As kind of kids move out of the family home and into other homes, how's the best way to link that using Understanding Society data? So these are the ways we're trying to solve these issues. But we know that you're doing that too. And so we would be really grateful if you could share your code with us so that we can share it with other users as a way of kind of really making Understanding Society an even more valuable resource for family research. So you may notice the numbers on this change a bit because I dropped some slides this morning because I thought Becky would tell me off for going over time. So I've skipped my slide that shows you that in general, Understanding Society is really good at keeping its response rates up and representative. But as I said before, at key life events, we do tend to lose people. So for example, when couples separate, it's quite hard to keep both those halves of the couples in the study. We also find that kind of we lose people around the time they have babies. And this is totally understandable. Big life events happen and answering the survey is not, you know, top of your priorities. But we're now trying to do some targeted kind of initiatives to both keep those people in the study, find ways to encourage them, so different kinds of letters and other initiatives like that, different incentives, as well as kind of looking back at the people we've lost and trying to identify key groups, for example, the other halves of separated couples, to persuade them to come back into the study so that we can kind of build up our sample that we, you know, for understandable reasons, lose at those key points in time. Next year, when we start wave 14, we're also carrying out a 10,000 household boost sample. So that's going to increase sample sizes overall, not for these specific groups, but obviously it will help with the numbers for these groups. And we're also thinking about some of the ways in which our following rules affect whether or not we follow people. So, for example, if an understanding society person gets married and has a child, whether or not, if they split up, we follow them depends on whether the understanding society person was a man or a woman. So we're kind of thinking about whether we want to rethink some of those things. And then finally, we're thinking of oversampling some groups. So we're currently doing a study on couples who live apart together in the innovation panel, and looking at whether we can persuade the other half of those couples to join the survey. And we're going to be doing an experiment about that in the next quarter. Oh, and I'm pressing the wrong thing to move myself on. Okay, so event-triggered data collection, I think I mentioned. So this is the idea that when something happens, like you tell us you're pregnant, or participants tell us they're pregnant, or they join starting a relationship or separating, we ask them once a month whether these things happen, and if they say yes, we follow up with a handful of other questions to find out more about that event at that point in time. And as I said earlier, it's to kind of capture the things that you might not know or remember when we interview you a kind of year later. And so we've been doing that for a year, and we're in the process of evaluating how it went, and then we'll design the next stage of it, and in particular think about how it interacts with the annual interview. And then we'll have another year's worth of evaluation. This is all on the innovation panel before we think about rolling it out to the main stage. But that is absolutely our goal in the long run. So then the second area I talked about is about parents who live apart, and Kelly, who's speaking later this afternoon, is leading this with me. And we've identified 12 different scenarios by which parents might live apart and how that interacts with the kind of survey roles. So these are just 3 of the 12. So the first one, you have a couple at the start of the study who have a child. Sometime down the line, they separate, and both parts of the household stay in the study, one parent with a child and the other parent on their own. In the second scenario on the screen, an understanding society marries a person who already has a child. For the whole time they stay as a family, all 3 of those people are part of the study, but the extra parent, the child's other parent, isn't part of the study. And then the third kind of illustration on the screen is where a person has a child with someone who they never live with, and hence both the parent and child of the understanding society member isn't part of the household. So we're currently looking at how the survey kind of captures all these different 12 scenarios, whether our following rules can be changed to improve the way we link with these external families, and ways of improving retention as well. We're also thinking about the content with the hope that for wave 14 next year, we can improve the content. So some colleagues did some experiments in the innovation panel about how we ask about separation, and we're building on that. We're thinking about changing the wording to allow for parents who have never lived together. Some of the relevant sections of the survey, like child maintenance, are kind of for all children in a household, assuming they have the same parents and experiences, which might not necessarily be true. We're looking at mirroring questions that we currently only asked of the resident parent for the non-resident parent. And for those of you who heard Renee's talk on Monday, we're building on their qualitative work to think about different ways of asking questions around shared care and decision making, and perhaps engagement with the legal system. We're also wondering about some of the things that other studies do. For example, HILDA, the Australian panel study, looks at children who don't live with either parent. And we know there are some of those in Understanding Society, so should we think about them a bit differently? So there's a range of ways we're thinking about content for parents living apart, and kind of how we might develop that, which we will be consulting on soon. In pregnancy and early childhood, where the lead is Edith, who I hope is probably on this call too, we have lots of data about children and their family. We ask about their parents before they're born. We know that our children of childbearing age are equivalent to other studies in terms of their representativeness. We collect data on pregnancy, birth at age 1, 3, 5, and 8, and we haven't found a single published paper that uses these data. We don't know why that is. And so we're trying to find out why that is. So if some of you have some ideas, it'd be great to hear them, but also kind of what can we do about it? So the key thing we're doing at the moment, or Edith's doing at the moment, is thinking about how we can improve the data that we share with you to perhaps make them more usable. So at the moment, our data on children under 10 is stored by parents' ID, sometimes by the child's ID. Where we collected things at initial waves, it's in different files to where we collected things in the annual survey. Sometimes we ask child-specific questions, and sometimes we ask about all children. So what Edith is doing is bringing that all together into what we're calling a babies file, but we actually mean children up until the age of 10 when we start interviewing them themselves. And there's going to be a beta version of that available in the summer, and then hopefully we'll add it to the normal data release in the autumn. I keep pressing the wrong thing to move on. I mentioned we're doing a study of people who leave the UK. So our long-term ambition is to have a kind of transnational family study as part of Understanding Society. We consulted about the first stage of that last year, and we've been running a pilot in the first half of this year, looking at how we track if and when people leave the country, and if and when they return, and why, and asking them about their lives in the non-UK country that they move to. So we have just finished the pilot study on that, and we're evaluating it. We got a small sample. Not all of the people who told us they were going to emigrate did, although obviously last year was a slightly strange year for emigration. Not all of them provided contact details we could actually follow up on. So we're kind of rethinking that in order to roll it out again later in the year. Given only handfuls of people emigrate each year, we're thinking that it will actually take us a couple of years to create a file large enough to share with you. So the current plan is to share in 2023. So they're the things we're doing. Wrong gadget. They're the things we're doing to kind of think about different data collection, but we're also trying to do some things, as I said, to improve the usability of the data. So Nicole is going to tell you any minute now about the family matrix, which is about trying to work out how families are connected across households in Understanding Society to enable you to do research on that much more. We're also wanting to improve our event history data. We've released a partnership history file that combines BHPS and Understanding Society, and we want to do that for other life events as well. And we're hoping that maybe some users might help us with this, and we'll be launching a fellowship call after Easter to ask people if they would like to both become Understanding Society fellows as a way of creating these event history files. So that was a slight whistle-stop tour of the things that we're trying to do to improve families. We'll obviously be putting these things on our website as we do them. Do join our mailing list to find out more about them. But we will be consulting at different points in time for different aspects of this. The first one being Nicole's family matrix, she's going to tell you about any second now, and then the launch of the fellowship call after Easter that I mentioned. followed by a kind of beta version of the babies file over the summer, and thinking about the questions for parents living apart. So we very much look forward to your input, either now or in response to those consultations. And then just another plea again to please share your code so we can share it with colleagues to help improve the study on family research. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Fantastic. Keep adding in comments and questions using the Q&A function, and we'll take some questions at the end. Do you want to say something now, Michaela, about how people can share their code?
Yes, so if you go to our website, there's a page for sharing your code, and we upload your code and you get the you can add a working paper or something, and it's just very easy to do.
It is. It's super easy. So yeah, do share code with us. It's a really good thing, and it's really helpful for us, and it's really helpful for other researchers as well. So do. Right, we're now going to hand over to Nicole, who's going to tell us about the family matrix.
Okay, thanks, Becky. Yeah, so I'm Nicole. I work on the data team at Understanding Society, and I'm going to tell you about this family matrix project that I've been working on with colleagues listed in the slides here. Okay, so the aims of this family matrix are to create a crosswave file that contains familial relationships over time. We also want to generate a variable that will work as an origin household identifier. We want it to be updated after each wave has been released, and this will account for new sample members and changes in relationships. The file will also be in wide format, so it'll be unique on the person identifier, so each row would be a separate person. The file will also be time invariant, so we won't be giving start and end dates for relationships, but we will be providing syntax in our user guide so we can show you how to do that if you want to do that for your research. So I've got two examples listed here of how this family matrix can be used. Firstly, family matching, so it'll be much easier to identify the PID-Ps of relations and then merge it into the existing data files, because this data already exists, but it requires complex code to actually get this information out. So we're kind of doing that part for you. And then generational analysis as well. This conference is about families, so all of the topics that I've heard so far will be of use to this family matrix as well. So the OSM Household Identifier, it's an identifier that we use to track individuals who move in and out of the household. And everyone who moves in and out of that household will all get this same identifier. So when I say OSMs, I'm talking about our core sample members. And if you look at the user guide, it will give you more detail about how we generate those people. And anyone identified with the household will get that OSM ID, and it's not necessarily familial associations. So this is just an example of how we generate the OSM household ID. So in the first wave that the household is enumerated in, we generate a flag for the oldest person in the household, and that person's PID-P is used as the OSM household variable. So we want to stress that it's just a way to get a unique identifier. So it doesn't actually matter who in the household we pick to be that carrier. But yeah, it's just a quick way to generate a unique ID. So this is another example of how the OSM household ID works in a longitudinal context. So we have the HID-P, which is the wave-specific household identifier, and that changes at every wave. So you can see in wave 1, there is a household here. And it has 2 parents and a child. And then you can see that they have this OSM ID here. And then in wave 5, one of the parents moves out. So you've got a parent and child here and another parent in a separate household. So here for wave 5, the HIDP is different from wave 1, and it's also different for these 2 households, but the OSM household ID stays the same. And again, in wave 7, when this parent moves in with another sample member, again, the HIDP is different from the previous wave, but the OSM household ID remains the same. So I'm just going to talk about the sources of data that we use to generate this file. So we use BHPS waves 1 to 18, and then Understanding Society, and I've got wave 1 to N because it's still ongoing, but at the moment we have 10 waves of data. So this amounts to 56 data files. And we use INDOR, which contains of all of our enumerated sample members, and EGO-ALT, which contains the relationships. So I've just got 4 relationships here at the moment. So partner, parent, step-parent, grandparent, but we will have a lot more relationships. We'll just have these 4 for the beta version, which I'll talk about a bit later. So for this, I had to treat BHPS and Understanding Society waves as slightly different because the variables are a bit different. But essentially, I get the relationships out of EGO-ALT, and I run some consistency checks. And then I get these variables such as PID-P of biological mother, PID-P of biological father out of INDOR, and run some consistency checks between the 2 files. I then go longitudinally and run checks again between the 18 waves, and then put it all together and run some more cross-survey checks just to make sure that all of the relationships that we have are consistent and make sense. So this is an example of how the family matrix will look like. And it's obviously a wide file, so I can't put everything on this slide. So I'll just go with one relationship first. So this is a household with 7 people in it. And you've got their OSM household here, their PID-P here, you've got sex here, a number of partners and partner ID and partner sex as well. So you can see there's 2 people in this OSM household, and they each have each other as their partner. But you could also have partners who are their current partner as well listed here. I'm pressing the wrong thing. So we also have parents as well. So here you have 4 people who have listed this person 1 and person 2 as their parents. And then person 1 has listed this person 7 as their parent. And then for grandparents, it's slightly different. Well, it's the same for this part, but it's slightly different here because we have this parents flag. So we know that these 4 people have listed person 1 and person 2 as their parents. And we know that person 1 has listed person 7 as their parent. So we know that this person 7 is therefore these 4's grandparent. So here, this flag shows that person 7 is their grandparent through person 1. So here it may seem like this is one household at one point in time, but we want to stress that this can contain anyone associated with that household. So if these 4 people then move out into separate households, they will still all be listed here under the same OSM household ID. So here's some quick figures for the initial beta family matrix. So we have about 150,000 people so far in the data. The OSM household with the most number of individuals is 19. So this is Understanding Society only, but I was working on it yesterday, and now I've added in BHPS, the number goes up to 66. So that shows the difference between a survey of 10 years and a survey of 30 years. We've got 55,000 people with parents reported, about 21,000 with step parents reported, 4,000 with grandparents reported, and 3,000 with parents and grandparents reported. So still to do, we've still got to add some other relationships that we think will be important. So adoptive and step parents, siblings, and other relationships. We still have to do some consistency checks and corrections. We still want to add some other variables that may complement the file. So these sample related variables that exist in other files at the moment. We also want to generate some derived variables that will help make the file a bit easier to understand. We still need to confirm final variable names and labels. And we still need to write a user guide, and we want this to contain extra syntax. So some examples of syntax, like I mentioned before, are to show the current relationship. So it will list all of the partners over time, but you might want to know what is the current partner. So we expect that the beta version will be available in Q2, so in the next few months. So if you would like to sign up, I've got the email for user support here. So if you just let us know that you want to sign up, and we'd also like to know about your thoughts and suggestions and how you could use the family matrix, so then we can improve it and make it easier to use as well. And I've just got some links here for the relevant user guide training and user support. And that's it.